Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Jake Tondro, and I'm a Starfinder developer, and I'm here with my fellow Adventure Path creator, Jason Keeley. Welcome.
Hello. I hope you all can still recognize me without my beard. It was a casualty of Halloween. If you watched the Oblivion Oath stream, I shaved it down to a goatee to be Professor Thorn, and I had to then get rid of that goatee because I couldn't just wear the goatee. I had to grow the beard back. So this is what happens.
The loyalty of the Paizo team is unlimited. All right, so we're here to talk about the latest Adventure Path module, adventure in the Attack of the Swarm path, the Forever Reliquary. Do I have that name right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's
100%.
Right. And it's written by Kate Baker, who cannot be with us today because she is enjoying her fantastic life in Northern California.
Yeah, well, soon we'll be able to get streaming guests in from using Twitch or however we're going to use it. But we have yet to perfect that technology. But until then, I worked with Kate on this as the developer, so I can talk a little bit about the process here and there. And I asked her if she had any stories she wanted to tell, so I'll be able to relate those.
Yeah, we know that you folks in the audience, you seem to be very interested in kind of getting a look behind the scenes when we create these adventures. Kind of what was the conversation between the creator and the developer, and how did the adventure change from original outline to manuscript to published form? And that's all a lot easier when we can get the author in there. So we know that you want that, and we're working on that. We'll be able to do that remotely pretty soon. And
I just want to quickly say to Hillary there, my true face is the one with the beard. This is a mistake. Right now.
This is the evil twin, right. Keeley from the other dimension.
Yeah, exactly. Kate Baker, who had already, by this point, I had talked to her, had already created fan favorite More Than Moss for Starfinder Society, and had written at least one or possibly one or two scenarios at that point.
So I just have to say, speaking of More Than Moss, so I'm working on this new Adventure Path. I wanted to put a More Than Moss in there.
Tease.
But I don't know if it's going to survive the development process, but I'm trying. I'm trying. All right, go on.
I think Kate had written some aliens for us, and done a few other smaller articles for us and other previous adventure paths. And so, I mean, at that point, it was like, oh, everyone knew who, at least here in Paizo, knew who Kate Baker was.
She did some scenarios, didn't she?
Yeah, I think she did some Pathfinder ones as well.
Yeah.
It was just sort of like nothing but good buzz about Kate Baker.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, let me just get Kate Baker in on this one. And I've got hopefully she'll have some free time to be able to jump in on one of these adventures. And I presented, a few to her, and we narrowed it down to this one, the Forever Reliquary, which was for both of us. There were some challenges there, which we'll get to in a minute. But I gotta say that it turned out terrific. Kate did a wonderful job, and I think you're all gonna like this one a lot. This is the part of the adventure path that starts to get a little weird. It sort of veers away from the war movies, tropes a bit, but don't worry, there's plenty of swarm to fight in this one. It just also talks a lot about sort of the backstory and helping the PCs get the MacGuffin that'll help them win the adventure path in the end.
Now, I've heard this story about how when the Attack of the Swarm idea was originally being pitched, you were like, I'm not into war movies. Like, this was not your thing.
I like them well enough, but they're not my forte. They're not my strong suit. And when it came down to that, when Rob and I and the rest of the Starfinder team were talking about what adventure path to do, it was like, we got to do a swarm at this point. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And then I was warning, it might get weird, probably, because I don't want to necessarily have every adventure be fighting the swarm here, there, afraid it would get too boring.
Yeah,
it does not get too boring.
I have this theory that adventure paths are like songs, and about 2/3 of the way through, you have the bridge.
Yeah.
Right. You have like that section of the song where the music changes a lot, and you get a new tune in there, but then it comes back to the main chorus in time for the end. Yeah. And so this 4 and 5, the one that follow, are the bridge for Attack of the Swarm.
Yeah. And we have Kate in chat now, so
oh, fantastic!
If she has anything to say, feel free to jump in, Kate, and correct us. or just add your own insights, that kind of thing. I'm sure everyone will love to read them.
Yeah.
So
totally.
again, one of the things I want to start off by talking about too is the
Yeah, good.
title of this one, the
Yeah,
Forever
okay.
Reliquary. I
Yes.
mentioned it last when I was talking to Liz about Huskworld. This one is probably my favorite title.
Okay.
I just think it has a real Doctor Who vibe.
Oh yeah.
I really love the word reliquary.
Yeah, it's a good word.
It is. It's just a nice vocab word that is a little fantasy, but you know, just putting the word forever in it kind of makes it
science fiction-y, yes.
Right. So and it is based on the fact that that Hylax, the goddess Hylax, who is sort of newish to the Starfinder canon, is called the Forever Queen.
Right.
And we everything kind of vaguely related to Hylax does get a little forever-y. I think there's a place in Czech called the Forever Hall. So there's that word gets used a lot. But I feel like I wanted to create this monastery, this reliquary, essentially, this place where there is a relic that the PCs need to go get, and just name it that and give it that timelessness vibe, I guess.
You can see Hylax priests using the word forever as kind of a buzzword, corporate buzzword in the church.
Indeed.
Right? Yeah. Better get my forever lunch. And
that's good. So at that point, we can talk a little bit about Hylax.
Let's do that, because Hylax, you mentioned this already. One of the things that we try to do on the Starfinder team is intentionally use the toys that are unique to Starfinder. Now, there's lots of legacy stuff from Pathfinder, and we embrace that. And we've already seen, for example, we know that the character operations manual is coming out, and we've got all kinds of stuff for the legacy races in there. And I made a point to note that in the blog post that I wrote last week for the com. But we also have a lot of new and unique toys in the Starfinder setting that are kind of our toys, and we get kind of proprietary with them.
A little bit, yeah.
And Hylax is an example of this. I mean, the character does have roots in the Paizo, in the Pathfinder setting.
It's a bit of a hybrid between the two in a way.
So tell us about that update.
Right. So it actually starts with the Forever Queen, and then we sort of named that as Hylax. The Forever Queen is sort of in the book Distant Worlds, which James Sutter wrote back in the day to talk about the universe around Galarian, which is a lot of stuff that has been picked up in Starfinder. There's a moon around Liavara, called Nchak, and it is mostly inhabited by arthropodic aliens, right? And they talk about how their Forever Queen is sort of like the big hive queen of that place that has sort of semi-divine connections. And what we did for, I guess when we were creating new gods for this one, we decided to fully turn the Forever Queen, that concept, into Hylax, who is known as the Forever Queen, and is the god of peace and diplomacy and first contact, and is also a big bug.
And I think that's a great contrast, because we take an image of a kind of creature that's often thought of as kind of scary or alien and frightening, something very inhuman, but make it a goddess of first contact, which I think is great. Yeah.
So we've sort of kind of talk around about how this Forever Queen on Nchak is probably thought of as a mortal incarnation of Hylax, and maybe it is part, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We kind of dance around that a little bit, and we also tied in Hylax to the Swarm. We did that in the core rulebook, and so I thought that Hylax would be a very important part of this adventure path. We're talking about the Swarm. The Swarm does have these sort of divine aspirations, which you find out later. So as in the last volume is called "The God Host Ascends."
Well, we see the God Host in the previous adventures.
I tried to see that in. You get a glimpse of this massive Titanic Hydra-like beast, but you don't know what it is. And this is the process of finding out what the God Host is. You find out a little bit about that here in this, as the PCs are searching for. They've got the name. They've got the name, the Forever Reliquary, from the previous adventure. Right. Actually, from even the one before that. But they've got the coordinates for it. Yeah. Once thought to be a sort of allegory for peace and love and understanding. A couple professors have thought, I think I know where this place really is. So
it's not just El Dorado.
It's not just that it's an actual place. So the PCs get the coordinates for that, and that's what this sort of starts off as, is hunting that place down.
And the MacGuffin thing, do we know the name of that from previous events? I don't want to name it if we don't want to spoil it.
No, you don't know. We just know that something important is there. You want to get it out because possibly the Swarm are also searching for the Forever Reliquary. So you want to stop them and find out what it is, and in a way, what they're searching for becomes a tool against that you can use against the Swarm. Stop them in their aspirations. So Hylax basically was sort of looked over the race known as the Kucharn. We talked about this in sort of the All About the Swarm episode. I think it was Rob and I talking about that. And the Kucharn, who were an ancient insectile race, sort of started fighting what's going on. Eventually became the Swarm, and Hylax was essentially like, well, that's your choice. I'm sorry you don't worship me anymore. I will move on to other insect people.
Such a cool god.
Hylax is real hands-off in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
While being part of a hive mind species, a lot of hive mind species worship her. She's also big on individualism.
It's interesting.
It has this sort of interesting dichotomy.
It's interesting that the goddess who is most hands-off is also the goddess who's physically incarnated.
Yeah.
You would expect the one that's physically incarnated to be like, running things from her physical body, but that's exactly the opposite.
She wants you to do, what you think is right, and in a lot of ways, it's sort of in this book you mentioned there is an article about the Church of Hylax, which goes into a lot about the history and the practices and some temples and whatnot. But one of the things that's mentioned in here is that some of the other good aligned churches think that like, hey, look. Because you're so hands-off, Hylax, that sort of like, if you don't do anything, that can lead to evil. So are you really a lawful good god? And Hylax is like, I think that people will make them, eventually make the right choices. And if as long as we are friendly and peaceful and diplomatic about stuff, then she's optimistic about everyone, sapient species, making the right choices.
People are inherently good.
That's what I think Hylax thinks.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So, and since you already brought up that article, I just want to note that it's got what I always love the most, which is player character options.
Yes.
In this case, a new mystic connection for the Hivemind mystic, which if you're playing a Sheeran and so on, it's
really good.
It
kind of straddles the line too about like what's good about hive minds and what's bad about hive minds. So you don't have to be a goody two shoes to take this connection. If you might worship Hylax, you could be someone more stuff like maybe even like Asmodeus is kind of lawful. It's like has to be part of the lawful evil hive mind in a way. Might be a way follow my rule.
It's an interesting alternative to the Overlord.
Yeah,
right. Because if you're a little tired of doing the Overlord all the time for your priest of Asmodeus, you can do the hive mind instead.
Yeah, perhaps it's one way to go.
That's interesting.
And this also has a diplomat theme in that article because Hylax is all about diplomacy.
Good for like a steward campaign, for example, or anyone who wants to play that Princess Leia type.
Indeed, yeah. I think one of the abilities is in fact called diplomatic immunity. The funny thing is that art for that piece also is a Sheeran with a big gun, which is like I think that he's named his gun diplomatic immunity. That's my headcanon.
That's
for
your
that one.
Headcanon.
Yeah, indeed.
Should have it. We would have it written on the side, except that we can't do writing in our art.
Right.
So and I know we're scattering all over the place here and moving all over in our topics, but the hive mind mystic connection is a good example of something else that we have to keep a track of developers, because you had a different mystic connection, which was similar in a previous that got cut in order for the hive mind.
Yeah, when Chris Sims and I were developing this adventure path, the way we work here is generally one developer works on the adventures and anything vaguely related, and then the other developer works on all the other back matter that's not directly tied into the adventures.
Yeah.
Because if we have like a gazetteer of a place, the adventure developer will adventure that because it will develop that because it's tied into the adventure.
Yeah.
So we had a couple articles as we were going along here. We talked about, there's an article in the first volume that's about the origin of the swarm and whatnot.
Yep.
And there's an article after that is about sort of, it's not about Sheerans because they're from the swarm. They're a big part of this adventure path as well.
Yep.
They are the most numerous worshippers of Hylax. They kind of brought Hylax to the Pact Worlds. In that second article about Sheerans, there was a harmony mystic connection, which is also sort of like about communalism and very similar to what a hive mind would be. And Chris and I sort of talked it out. We had this happen, and then when I noticed that the next one, two volumes later had this one, we had to go back and sort of fix the other one. We kind of came to the agreement that the hive mind one was a little more interesting. They're both great though, so I'm sad we can't have both of them. We just sort of replaced that with a few spells, sort of like harmonic, like Battlefield Link or something. Battle Mind Link.
Battle Mind.
So it's to help you work together as a group, helping like Sheeran's would.
Well, all of us that are old players of other role-playing games with Battle Mind powers. There you nice go. Way to use those spells.
To you. That's sort of one of the roadblocks that happens during development. And after you've developed something, You might find that it clashes with something later on, and then you've got to make that choice. It's often easiest to make the choice to say, the thing that I haven't yet developed, let's change that, so I don't have to go back and do more work.
Right.
However, sometimes it's a better choice for the game.
The better choice is to go back.
And fix the thing that doesn't quite fit. That not necessarily doesn't fit, but it's just sort of like, this is too close. Could harmony appear in another book? Perhaps it's saved somewhere, I'm sure.
Yep.
If we wanted to do a lot more mystic connections. It's just also just kind of closest to how Hivemind works. So
yeah, it might get tweaked or.
Yeah, it would have to probably get a little bit more tweaked. So that's basically how it works.
Yeah.
And to sort of like go back to Hylax and sort of go on to how this connects to the adventure.
Yes, good. Yeah.
What happens is the PCs find out that they kind of get a little history, Sheeran history lesson as they go on from the Exodus, from when they fled from the swarm and how they got to the pack.
Right. This whole adventure path is answering a lot of questions and resolving a lot of the mysteries around the swarm and Hylax connection.
Not quite resolving, but sort of filling in some blanks that we haven't filled in, like because there is 83 years between the end of the gap and when the Sheerans show up in the pack world.
Okay.
We don't know when the Sheeran broke off. We know that the Sheeran broke off from the swarm. We never say when. That's a sort of mystery we do want to answer. It's not really because it's not meant to be a mystery. It's just meant to be information.
So this is a larger topic, and I want to take just a step back for a minute and kind of get all of the audience on board for a second. There are different kinds of questions in the setting when we write these books, right? The core book, or we write Packed Worlds, or we write adventure paths like this. Some of these mysteries, like what is the gap or where is Galarian, are questions that we are never going to answer.
Yes, they're central to the core of this.
And we're intentionally leaving them unanswered to let GMs do whatever you want to do with them. And I've talked to a lot of GMs online who have their own decisions about what happened to Galarian or what happened in the gap. And that's great. Like, keep doing that. That's exactly why we did it that way.
And to be clear, we know the answers to a lot of
yes.
Like, oftentimes we'll write a plot hook and dangle it in Pack Worlds, and will be, I don't know what the answer is. I just like the question. Big central tenets, mysteries to the setting, we know the answer to.
Yeah.
We have to know so we don't accidentally say the same thing later on about something else, right?
Right. Okay.
So we know, we're just not saying.
Yeah. Then, however, there's other like lesser mysteries, which maybe we create as a plot hook, like, oh, what's happening on this planet, or where does this alien race come from, this species come from? And we create those as plot hooks or as things to later explore in future books, but we're never going to be able to answer all of them. And some of them, and they're all fairly minor, but then there's other things that sort of lurk in the middle. They're important. They're not key, but we kind of don't want to answer those mysteries. We kind of want to leave them mysterious. Partly because it's really hard to keep track of all of the ever expanding continuity. Yeah. And the mystery of Hylax and the Swarm maybe falls into that category.
It is sort of like, people think this and people believe that, and we sort of hand wave a lot of it and make it real mushy and cloudy. But and that way is better, because certain things happen, because we also have the gap, and certain things happen in the gap, and we'll never know why. Right. For logically, they must have happened during the gap, because there wasn't before and it is after. So something, but we can never really answer the question of what specifically happened during the gap. And that is what sort of, we don't know specifically what happened, how the Sheeran became the Sheeran, broke off from the Kucharn, right? We don't know that because that happened during the gap. But we do know that now that they are free from the swarm and they are in the packed world, so we have that part of the answer. And the specifics of what we can know about, we just didn't have room for yet. Yeah. And so that's sort of like, this adventure path helps sort of, for lack of a better word, answer those mysteries, or just sort of fill in those blanks of like, oh, look, they actually, it's because of the end of the gap is what the Sheeran were able to actually physically break away from the swarm and make their way throughout the galaxy, and eventually, hopefully, as they're being chased, get the first drift engines. And what happens is, during that time, really early on, is they're beaten down. They're being chased. It is like the first episode of the new Battlestar Galactica. Yes, right. They're constantly being chased by the Swarm. The Swarm wanted, for whatever reason, this is like the one emotional thing that's about them. They want to get the Sheeran back, at least during the first years after the gap. And they land themselves on this comet.
The Sheeran
the Sheeran do.
Yeah.
To refuel or just rest for a moment. And that's when they're visited by Hylax, who says, wow, you're broke off from my children. I offer you peace and first contact and a succor in this time of your need. I'm a god. And Sheeran like, great, sounds great. Let's do it. We worship you. Good times. So basically that is when they became, devotees of Hylax at that point and brought that religion further on. Meanwhile, a couple people, a couple Sheeran sort of stayed behind to sort of create it's a holy site now.
Yeah.
This comet is a holy site.
Comet.
And create a temple there, and eventually at some point it becomes the Forever Reliquary.
Right.
So this comet, which is known, which is another thing that didn't have a name until Kate named it, the Prodigal Stone, which I thought was just fantastic. I had to keep that. And basically, at some point there is a relic that gets made.
Reliquary has to have a relic.
It has to have a relic in it. So basically, this relic gets made and gets. They don't know what the Sheerans make this from. Actually, they make it on Suscalon, right? And they don't know what it is. They were just sort of divine providence, divine guidance, let them do that. And then they go, Hylax says, we'll bring it to the holy site. Bring it to the Prodigal Stone. They bring it to the Prodigal Stone. Like, we have to keep this safe. We don't know what it is. Well, it's a crown, basically. Yeah. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it does. But Hylax says it's going to be important, so we have to find a place for it. And what they do is they hollow out the inside of the comet and create the Forever Reliquary and start and that sort of attracts more followers of Hylax and it grows in time and it becomes sort of a mystery, and it's a kind of hidden place, right? And that not everyone believes is true and exists, but it holds the crown of Hylax.
We have some cool art.
Yeah, we do have some cool art. We can talk about this is the sort of the opener piece for the Church of Hylax article, and there you can see there's a Sheeran who is basically saying, with the holy symbol of Hylax on their chest, and it's basically, hey, I bring the news of Hylax to you. Yeah. That is, it's good. Please enjoy it. And then sort of going back to the Forever Reliquary, it attracts more insectile species. And we can see here on the next piece of art, the current abbot of the Forever Reliquary, Tuva.
Trox?
Yeah, she's a Trox. And that's another thing that's sort of cool about Starfinder in a lot of ways is that again, with why Hylax is like about a big bug that's about diplomacy and whatnot. The Trox are big bugs that look kind of scary, but they are peaceful, especially those that worship Hylax, and especially Tuva here. She looks like she would really
mess you up
bad, but she's just like, come on and welcome.
I love their multiple limbs, the great big giant arms and the middle
little
arms
ones,
in the middle.
And then also speaking of that, the next piece is another Han, the sort of arthropodic creatures from Breathida. They and it's sort of like not quite obvious from this, but they're size large, so they are big.
Yeah,
bug guys with their big bug mandibles, and especially this guy. Since he's a guard, he's got a hammer, so he's like, I need to protect this place. So when you first meet them, you might be like, oh no, and they don't necessarily, they don't speak. They might not speak your language, so it becomes a matter of like talking them down before they hit you over the head with that hammer.
I see Kate talking about how great this art is. They're one of the rare few just really wonderful joys of this job is getting to see things that you have written get illustrated by these amazing artists. Yeah. And when sketches come in, we are all little kids. We all like huddle around the screen, look at the cool art. It's just really fantastic to see other people take these concepts you've written and make them into
it's great, especially that sort of thing. So basically, the Forever Reliquary becomes this sort of pilgrimage place, and very few people visit it, but they're there. They basically sometimes when people go, they stay there and continue to watch over the crown of Hylax. And Tuva, the abbot, has right before the adventure starts, she starts having these visions from Hylax about what's going on in Suscalon, and this is about the time saviors are about to show up on the comet. The long
foretold prophecy.
The prophecy is about to be fulfilled. Exactly. So it becomes when the pieces arrive, and they have to actually like find the comet, which their coordinates aren't quite off. So there's some fun space stuff happening there. They get chased by a giant amoeba, and then they find the comet, and they've basically got to find the entrance to the reliquary. It's all about sort of like the place likes to keep itself hidden because it's holding
Yeah.
a holy relic. And Tuva knows that they're probably the ones prophesied, but she's got to like basically make sure that they are. So she
And-
lets them sort of
right.
have to stumble around the
So then
icy comet.
So then how do they prove themselves? Because here's the trick, right?
That is the
So
trick,
I think in a traditional role-playing game adventure, when the PCs have to prove themselves, they always expect some kind of martial contest, right?
yeah.
They have to fight a bunch of bad guys or survive a terrible hazard.
Right,
Or
go
but-
there and get the good thing from the other bad guys. and bring it back.
Yeah. But Hylax is not that deity.
I know. So that is sort of what I wanted to do at this point. Was like they had to prove themselves to be worthy of the crown of Hylax to Tuva and all of the monks there. And so in the outline from this, I kind of just wrote to Kate, Trials of Hylax.
Yes.
The PCs have to do some stuff that vaguely has to do with diplomacy and first contact and
Wow.
being peaceful. I don't know what they are. And then she can write back. I was like, yeah, that's really tricky. And then we hashed it out a little bit. And she had some great ideas about what they could be. Like, let's actually have them make first contact with something. Let's actually have them negotiate a peace between two factions.
And
let's
this
have them do this other thing.
This is great because so many players they tell us that we hear them say, I want an adventure with more role playing and less combat, right? And often the non-combat characters in the group can feel a little bit underserved sometimes. But this is the adventure for them. Like these are the scenes where you get to really shine.
Yeah, indeed. And there are three of them, basically three of these trials that the PCs have to go through. And Kate had all these ideas for them, and they were great ideas. But they also this adventure kind of almost wholly takes place on a comet.
Yeah.
Where it either had to be like, are these simulations? Are these magical in some fashion?
We can solve that problem.
What we ended up doing was like, let's make them be real things. So there's actual, stakes at hand. So we kind of hashed it back and forth. And the idea that we came up with was had to do with a lot like that one Star Trek The Next Generation episode where they find that window portal.
Yes.
It's kind of an early second season-ish, maybe first season. And it sort of cycles through these places. And
it's also kind of like Guardian of Forever.
Yes.
The classic Star Trek
the
episode.
classic one, too. It's got, it's probably what they based the Next Gen episode. But I was talking to campus. Do you remember that Next Gen episode? I'm thinking about this portal situation. So that's basically what happens is that through the grace of Hylax, this Forever comet begins moving faster than the speed of light throughout the galaxy to go into places that are in need. And then the divinations of Tuva lets them know what they're up
Let's
against.
get some fantasy in our science fantasy.
Exactly. So it kind of skips around like a rock across a pond and goes to these places that are in trouble. The PCs are able to move from the comet to the places in trouble via a sort of basically a portal. Yeah. Right? This sort of doorway portal. They're given basically like, you've got 12 hours to do this, make first contact or do this
countdown
thing.
clock.
There's a countdown clock on that, and there's basically, can you do it or not? To get the favor of the monks. Because Tuva believes in them, but then there's also there's a council a bit that's sort of like, I don't know who these people are. What's up?
That makes total sense.
It's always the way.
Yeah, it's always the way.
Failure means Tuva will be very disappointed. Very disappointed in you. Then she makes her disappointment known. There is a fail state a bit, but it doesn't stop the AP.
Yeah.
The first one of the. We'll sort of talk about them not in the order that you do them, but
okay.
One of them is sort of helping creatures in need. This one is actually almost combat oriented. You have to save some dinosaurs from a rising.
Save the
flood.
Rancodas.
These are bigger and meaner than Rancodas, so you basically have to get these dinosaurs, away from some flooding plains, right?
Yeah.
But they don't want to move because they're big dumb dinosaurs.
Yeah,
so
right.
it could be
it's sort of an animal handling.
Animal handling check, some sort of like intimidate, just scare them.
Maybe we can lure them. Maybe
or
we can scare them.
Or you can smack them, and then they chase you, and you're like, "Well, run away."
There you go.
Before you get crushed by these.
Stir the hornet's
dinosaurs.
nest.
And then the other one is doing some diplomacy between two groups. There's basically a planet you get to that is basically there's some Gorons and some Nuars, and the Gorons are like, we're nature botanists.
Oh, yeah.
And the Nuars like, well, we've started this mining company over here, and it's ruining the nature. So it becomes but the Nuars were there first. So it becomes a question of you talk to both. You end up spending your time getting to know both the delegations.
Kind of problem solving.
It becomes problem solving. You try to, and then, you know, basically there's lots of different ways to sort of get to know people and then eventually convince them to sign an agreement that helps, you know, that is a compromise between you two.
Yeah. This is a great example of the way that tabletop role-playing games are so much better than if you were trying to do that in a computer game, where it would come down to picking the right dialogue choices.
Yeah.
And you would just totally game that system, or you would look it up. Like, what do I have to say to each of the NPCs? Yeah. But here you have to actually interact with people, and you have a lot more options, and it's a sandbox.
Right, yeah. The adventure sort of does go through a number of those quote-unquote dialogues. Sure. If you want to talk to the Gorons about botany, make a life science check, you know.
Sure, yeah.
And then you get them on.
But those are all guidelines for the GM.
Yeah, exactly. So it could end up just being a full role-playing experience at your table if you want. And then the third trial, which is actually, I think, the first trial. I think those are in reverse order. Which is the fun one, is a first contact situation.
Yeah.
And the PCs have to make first contact.
We have art for this.
We do, yeah. So I want to show this off. The PCs have to make first contact with
glowing oozes.
Little glowing oozes who only, and it's made even more difficult because they only communicate through color, which is another wonderful thing that Kate came up with. And it becomes a situation where, like, how do you figure out that they do that? You have to figure out that that's what they're like.
It's Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but like you don't.
But red, blue, green, yellow, blue, blue, blue. Okay, the planet of matches. So you have to figure out how they communicate, and you've got to figure out how to communicate with them, and just let them know, like, hey, look, you know, these are an intelligent species who have not yet developed space travel.
Yeah,
this is a real, unfortunately, breaking the prime directive situation. But you're going to tell them, like, hey, look, if you need anything, there's good people out in space. Maybe it's not necessarily, hey, worship Hylax. You know, you don't have to tell them to worship Hylax, but it is a sort of like
missionaries.
You're not missionaries, exactly. You just sort of get to talk to them and just sort of figure out peacefully. Flash them colors. Because when you show up in here, you can see, you know, Keskadai and Obadiah just sort of like, what these blobs must be thinking when they see not even just sort of alien creatures, but alien creatures that are so unlike themselves, and again, vice versa. I think someone's asking if this is Spoozifies people. Maybe it is, actually, because it wasn't part of that creature companion creation, but they could be these little blobbies. There's a number. We have so many blobs. So many weird little blobs.
Yeah.
If we can only make them, maybe they'll be playable one day. And once they have joined the Galactic Society, we can make shape, color changing.
It's only a matter of time before they show up on the bridge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just blue, yellow, blue, blue, blue. So yeah, and again, this ends up being a skill challenge for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's not just about diplomacy. Here, there's stuff about, like, figuring out what they are and how they talk and what their society might be like, and how to create basically a communication device that flashes colors in the right way. So that's an engineering skill check, essentially, right? And then there's deal with some problems here and there, and eventually just sort of take the 12 hours to do all that, and then just sort of just say hi.
Yeah.
Can you say hi to these without scaring them away? Because you're way bigger than they are. So those have ends up being the three trials, and I think that again, sort of Kate Baker just sort of made those and really knocked it out of the park with picking those. How at the end, though, it's not just about once you've succeeded or failed at these trials.
Yes.
Because
the swarm is never far away.
The swarm is never far away, especially when the comet enters the Suscalon system.
And
is essentially just becomes a big bright beacon to the swarm. And that's where the only one war trope, I think, of this particular volume is a hold the line situation.
Yes.
Where there are waves and waves of swarm creatures that come and attack the monastery, and are basically you've got to plant some explosives and cut off the tunnels inside the comet to sort of.
And it becomes a holding action.
Because Tuva is taking the crown and sending you on your next mission, which basically she's empowering it with ritualistic powers, basically, and sending you off because from here you do the thing that you need to do.
You're being a little vague.
I'm
being
a little vague. I think it's pretty. If you can go on the website and read the marketing text for this. But the next adventure has you physically go into a mindscape that represents the swarm Hivemind to basically cut off the Suscalon subcolony from the main swarm hive.
Yeah.
And that'll throw them into disarray.
Psychological warfare takes on a whole new meaning.
Yeah, oh boy, that's a good point. And throw them into disarray so you can take back Suscalon, and that's what the Crown of Hylax is meant to do. You take that into the hive mindscape and just use it in there.
Well, it's interesting because this creates an actual strategy for how you can win. I mean, the swarm is kind of unstoppable.
Yes.
Like, it's so big and it's so vast.
My intention, yeah.
But if we create a way by which you can isolate part of it,
right.
and then you can only have to defeat that part of it, which makes the challenge at least surmountable.
Right, at least feels surmountable.
Yeah.
It's still
we still have this giant
thing to deal with.
A giant swarm made up of little swarms.
Yeah, once we get to that volume,
we'll get there. Yeah,
art, which is another fantastic piece of art. So yeah, I mean that's sort of the adventure in a bit of a nutshell.
Yeah.
Without giving away too much, as a whole, and there's also a lot of even between the trials, you can talk to the other monks, the Sacred Assembly, which is the council sort of under the abbot. Do research in their library. So there's a lot of non-combat stuff to do in the middle of this adventure. It kind of starts with a little bit of combat, and then especially scouring the surface of the comet, and then ends with a bunch of combat.
And then we have the big climactic third reel finish.
Right.
And because this is a monastery, this leads us into one of our other articles. We have a whole article on monasteries of the galaxy in this, which is an opportunity for me to get into Solarians, which I always love reading about.
We talk about the Cosmo Nasteria,
the Cosmo Nasteria,
hey, Owen. One assumes that's Owen Casey Stevens.
Hey, Owen. We miss you, man.
We miss you. We'll talk. Anyway, so the article on the monasteries just goes into a number of them, and has some player options at the end. I think it might only have the one theme, actually, now that I think about it.
We have art for for one of the themes.
Yeah, it's the Star Walker theme, or the space, which is I had to show this one because it's a Skittermander careening through space. Upside down and just sort of is this bad for the Skitter? I don't know. I don't know exactly if this is bad news for the Skittermander or not.
But this is a theme for characters who are experienced spacewalkers. Right, so you have all kinds of zero-G familiarity, and you know how to use your spacesuit.
It's not just to be good at zero-G, but just to be out in the emptiness of the void, and also open your mind to that sort of thing.
There's an old Heinlein novel that I grew up reading called "Have Spacesuit Will Travel," and it's all about it's kind of gets into that a little bit.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. This from Owen saying that when Sutter first wrote the word Cosmonastery, he was afraid it would get cut. That Owen would cut it in development as it was too goofy. Owen loved it, of course, because not too much. Owen, I think, finds too goofy.
Owen, that word Cosmonastery is the word that when I was reading the core rulebook at my home before I had even talked to Paizo about hiring.
Oh, right.
I loved any game that had that word in it, and I said I want to meet the person that wrote that word. And but by the time I got here, Sutter had already left.
Gone, yeah. Well,
but I got to interview him last week on my podcast, so that worked out.
Plug a podcast.
Little plug.
In the middle of this stream.
But Owen, I'm glad that you did not cut that word, because I might not be here today.
Yeah, there you go. Well, everyone lucked out. So we talk about that particular Backmatter article talks a little bit about other monasteries. Talk about Solarian monasteries, other sort of non-religious monasteries, and a couple religious ones.
There's a Calistrade bit in there. There's a bit about there's this really cool kind of monastery for people that live in space. I can't even forgotten all the details.
I can't remember all the details of that one either.
Lots of really cool stuff in there. I think the author of that article did a really great job.
Yes. I'm gonna say who that is right now, which I remembered. Oh, it's Anthony Bono.
It is Anthony Bono. Yeah. Whose name has been batted around the office for other things too.
Yes, we have. I've had other creatures and other articles written by him. That's fantastic. And then of course there's the Backmatter. This one is one of the. I think this is the only a volume in this AP that has a playable species in the back.
Oh,
a new one. The Trinier, who are kind of
the bird people.
Yeah, they're kind of like robot birds. Little, and they're small too. They're small robot birds. And they have they come from I believe one of the other planets in the Susclon
Not
system.
Kenku. They are not Kenku.
They're not Kenku or Tengu or any of the type, but they look a little bit like.
Yeah,
a little bit.
And
they
of
almost
course,
have like they almost also look like Nosoi. Nosoi the bird psychopomps. That's my first.
Yes.
They have a very plague mask face.
All right.
That basically.
And this being a swarm adventure, are there any new swarms?
You know it. Let's take a look at the art of this last piece of art we have for the Swarm Dramavire, who is just terrifying. That is mostly an acid spitting.
Yeah, I couldn't tell whether that was
bug.
it looked like a hand coming out of his mouth or something.
No, I think that's just meant to be like a spray.
Yeah,
gross acid. These guys are no fun. But they're great fun if you're GM. They're kind of swarm assassins in a way.
Yeah.
I think this might be the one that we said a big assassin bug, and just sort of went with that.
And they have all the little spiky bits all over them.
Yes, that is the one. That is actually, if I recall correctly, once they grab you, it is harder for you to get free of them, and even if you do, you rip
some
of your
ongoing
flesh.
damage and stuff,
exactly,
persistent
like that.
damage. Yeah.
Ugh. So we've got those. We've got another one, which we don't have R4, that is a big sort of digging swarm.
Oh yeah.
And
because they're down in the
to bust through the rock.
You have to bust through the comet to get to the PCs.
Comet,
yeah.
I think this one might be the one with the demon in it.
Oh, that's right. We do.
It's a demon.
Yep.
And
I want
a big.
What are the chances of us getting some low CR demons sometime soon?
Well, we might have them.
We might.
I don't know.
I would
always do that. I mean, because you've got
demons make great bad guys, but a lot of our demons are really high CR, and they're kind of hard for me to use at low levels.
We just have to convert over the dretches.
Well, dretch, that'd be the obvious first step to go.
Yeah. One I can't remember which dretches are devils or demons. That's
the dretch or the lemure. The lemure is the devil.
Lemure is the devil.
So
yes.
the dretch is the demon.
Dretch is the demon.
Yeah.
We convert those over maybe at some point if they are necessary. We in Starfinder we have the same outer planes to play with.
Yes.
We don't necessarily want to hit the same notes because it is the same exact, and not the same exact. We want to update them a little bit here and there. The Flashfire Demon in here kind of has a kind of like a hacker vibe.
A little conversion goes a long way.
Yeah,
we want to not overuse that. I mean, it's important to do, and something I think the audience, all of you players out there, you expect us to do it, and you have favorite monsters that you want to see converted, but we can't just go to that well all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
We want to do it judiciously,
exactly,
for the right reasons. Which is not to say that we haven't occasionally thrown something in there just for fun.
Yeah.
Because we personally want to see it. I think there's a few things that are coming up that I can't talk about.
That looks that's a little embarrassed face there. Like
I love it, and I also am like, why did I do that? But it's gonna be great. Because it there's certain things. There are also certain things in Pathfinder universe that are say they're from other planets.
We have an idea from Owen here. Idea for Alien Archive 6. Do devil and demon entries with rules for making them at different CRs the way the Predator and Herd Beast entries work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't remember, the Predator and Herd animal, they have like CR 1/2, 3, 6, and 12 or something.
Yeah. The tricky thing though with demons is like at least they're sort of meant to embody specific. No, this is the devil, but they're meant to. Demons are meant to embody specific things, so it's kind of weird to say this is a CR1 demon that is generic. And then you have to put a different.
Well, in some sense,
there's so many different templates you could put on.
I mean, of course, anybody can do this with the Alien Archive rules anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you and if you look at the monster summon monster rules, you can summon a demon, and it just uses the Alien Archive stats and has slaps on a demon template, and you're good. But yeah, it would be. That's my one thing I would like to see. Would be more of that.
More outsiders and whatnot. Yeah, we'll get to them.
But
we'll always have around
more monsters coming.
So, and more new. We also like to do new, weird, crazy monsters.
That's right. Yeah. It wouldn't be Starfinder if we didn't have all kinds of weird, crazy monsters coming out.
Indeed. So we can start taking some questions if anybody has them
totally.
online. I've said nearly everything I could possibly say about this adventure. I don't necessarily have anything to show that was like changed from development that except for the stuff that we talked about.
Yeah, no cool maps in progress to show this time, but we'll have more later. We'll get back to it.
The maps are just pretty much could use them. But that's that's the most visual thing.
Yeah.
Always show that. It would look real boring if I showed you what Kate wrote versus what the finished product was. Here, read this for 10 minutes, everybody. So, gosh, what can we talk about while people are asking questions?
Oh, I'm sure they'll figure out something. Now, I do have a note.
Question?
I have a note here that there were some environmental kind of dangers in this adventure.
Oh, that's true.
There's some survival, maybe exploration aspects to the comet.
When you're on the comet, going through the ice, you're trying to find the entrance to the underground reliquary. It's cold. I mean, while that is easily mitigated by your armor's environmental protections, I threw in one in there that if you mess up a survival check, you will fall in something called I've forgotten what it's called, sink snow, which is like quicksand but snow and very very cold. So that's kind of a new
stuff
thing
like that.
I think I might have added that in from Kate's stuff.
We have a question from Joe Jungers. Any playable races?
Yes, the Trinier. We mentioned the bird heads. If you missed that, we mentioned about
can they fly?
No, I don't think they're like robot birds.
Oh, robot birds.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really fully remember all the details, but I can easily look them up. No, they have good vision and a resistance network. I'm not going to tell you what that means.
Okay, very good.
But they're definitely kind of robotic.
Owen asks, what movies would you consider inspirational for running this AP?
Okay, well, yes, we've talked a little bit about early on about our what was going on with this, but definitely, I mean, obviously, Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers is a classic. Aliens, the second one.
Oh yeah, the second one. Yeah, that would be
especially for the ending sequence of this, where you're trying to hold the line against unending hordes. Yes. That reminds me very much of the climax of Aliens, with them kind of retreating to the medical center and then
holding the back. You can kind of check out most of your World War II movies for like at least the beginning.
Yeah, you named Bridge on the River
Kwai. Might be sort of a nice
for the first one.
Yeah, for the first one, a non alien movie, non-sci-fi, sort of just to get the other parts of it, the military parts.
That kind of Dirty Dozen vibe. I suspect a lot of player character groups fit into that.
Yeah,
like this sort of shady, morally gray characters with all kinds of different backgrounds.
Let's see. I was gonna for like later on in the middle. I would kind of think about you could watch a Mad Max or a Road Warrior for the fifth one.
We haven't talked about too much yet.
Talked about. It's a little post-apocalypse vibe somewhere in the middle there, even though it's weirder than that. Stuff like your classic war movies and your classic sci-fi war movies.
If someone picked up COM, that's the new character operations manual, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, and it's a fantastic book, by the way. You're going to love it. Would the new classes in that, which are the Biohacker, the Vanguard, and the Witch Warper, work in this adventure, even though this adventure came out first?
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely.
I mean, you could be a biohacker, combat medic. You could definitely a Vanguard would work great.
Like Vanguard will be everybody's favorite character in this group.
And a Witch Warper. There's a lot of kind of, in a weird way, a little bit of reality hopping.
Yeah, I think a Witch Warper would totally get into that Mindscape stuff.
Yeah. So yes, and there might even be options for those, or at least Witch Warper. I think there's a couple. Near the end we threw in a little Witch Warper spells, some extra spells.
Oh yeah, right on.
Some new ones, or that are also for mystics and technomancers. But we are able to sort of start seeding that now.
All right, so I have a very important question. Yes. All right, so I saw this is coming from Cosmic Crit.
Hey, Patrick.
I see this is written by Kate Baker. But I'm worried that there are no Morlamas in this AP volume. And if this terrible thing should be true, where can we put some ice walruses in this adventure?
If you want to use Morlamas in this adventure, there's a couple. Here's some things you could do.
Okay, look, you could. The correct answer is everything can be replaced by a Morlama.
Right. You can have a Morlama show up in the monastery as being a devotee of Hylax, who's just not an insect person.
Right.
That's easy. You could also replace either the Gorons or the Nuars with Morlamas.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Probably the Gorons, I would imagine. one of those two. You could also have the replace the dinosaurs with giant
They could be
de-evolved Morlamals.
They could be like Neanderthal Morlamals.
Yeah, Neanderthal Morlamals. Yeah. So there you go. You can put them all. You could also have you could replace any of the ice elementals with Morlamals. Morlamals made of ice, I guess.
You will find, Cosmo, because I'm always happy when my jokey questions are answered earnestly. You will find that is the only way I know to answer questions is with absolute earnestness. Like I am super over earnest.
I'm sarcastically earnest, I think.
All right. Situation. Any interesting starship combat possibilities in this AP?
Yeah. So as you were starting off, you're in your starship and you're tracking down this comet. The coordinates you have are a little off because they're calculated maybe from out of date data. But you're able to sort of catch a trail and sort of a mystical trail
because the comet's shooting all over space.
Yeah, it does probably follows a normal route until Hylex says now go over there
until it suddenly doesn't.
This is why it's called the Prodigal Stone, because it always says come back to certain places.
It's not just a clever name.
It's not just a clever name. You find sort of to help you along your way, you find a derelict spaceship that is also most likely was trying to find the Forever Reliquary. So you get some data off them. But you find out that what happened to this starship is that it was attacked by a starship creature, and it sort of pushed itself off into this sort of quasar field, I think, which damages your starship as it's something like I can't quite remember.
That sounds interesting.
It's weird. It's something. It's a space phenomena that Kate being very familiar with space phenomena.
Yes.
Added in there. It sort of, as you fly through, it sort of messes up your systems a bit. And you piloting checks to sort of avoid all that. But then as you're getting the information, as you're leaving, the thing comes back. Sort of, and this quasar field sort of like kept it at bay because it hurts it.
Yep.
So you can sort of have this starship combat near this field, and if you want to sort of like fly back into it, but your starship's getting damaged if you don't want to have the fight. The fight is with a giant space amoeba, by the way. Classic space amoeba, and it's just trying to eat you. And so it's a matter of like, do you want to just shoot the thing up and drive it off, or do you try to hide back in the quasar, or do you sort of skirt it so it can't get too close to you and you can shoot it?
One of the things I've heard from a lot of players of Starship Combat is that adding some kind of terrain, adding some kind of area effect really helps the encounter become more interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like we're implementing some of that.
We always try to do that a little bit here and there when we can make it make sense and have it not be too complicated. So yeah, there's that. That is basically, and then you'll get to the comet shortly after that. So after that, there's no starships.
And that's just the starship stuff in this adventure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of all kinds of other stuff going on throughout the
especially in the 6th book too. There'll be some interesting stuff you've got to do.
If you're an insectoid race playing through this AP, are there any special moments just for those PCs?
In a way, I think this it's going to be up to your GM to really kind of drive that home.
I mean, the monastery is filled with all kinds of insectoid
so
races.
You're gonna see other species like you, basically, if you're playing an insectile species. And there's like all throughout, there's a Husk World is full of the Bolitas and whatnot.
That's right.
And a few, I think there's a Formian.
Every bug species makes an appearance in this AP.
As much as I can fit in here, I put in here. So there's a lot of moments like that, and especially if you're an insectile race or Sheeran even. That worships Hylax. This is sort of like an AP where you can have that. You can have soul searching moments and have really good juicy RP moments. And that kind of thing. But there's nothing like that. But there are a few. I think eventually near the end is when you get too close to the swarm, you can if you have Sheeran's limited telepathy, you get a little bit of staticky dreams and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there's little bits here and there.
Negative feedback from the gods.
Right, exactly. So and again, sort of there might be a couple places too where like the swarm focus on you because you're Sheeran and they want to. They feel mad about it. So. There's moments, but if you like for the real, as anything in any of these APs, it's kind of up to the GM to personalize it a little bit here and there.
I think that's worth dwelling on a little bit because this is kind of the big challenge of making these APs is that we have to appeal to every possible group and every possible player character.
Yeah.
But we don't want to railroad and we want to create. So we're really encourage individual GMs and individual players to customize the adventure and take it in the direction that you want it to go in. When you have to rewrite large sections of this adventure to suit your table, you are doing it right. Like that is exactly the way you should be doing. I mean, we give you a bunch of tools, and if you don't have time to customize it, and you're like a lot of people in the 21st century where, you crack open the adventure and you run it as written, because who has time to write anything else?
That is a little bit what I'm doing lately.
Yeah.
Of sort of converting Strange Aeons to second edition on the fly.
Oh,
Sometimes just,
fantastic.
I'm converting it literally as we, you're at this part of the table. Let me figure out how to do that.
Nice.
But yeah.
This is your weekly 2E game?
Yeah. There's I'm busy. And before I came to work here, I was always running APs because the stories there are always great.
Yeah.
And I could quite generally easily tweak it to fit the players. This is reading. Like, I know I've got a player who's into guns or whatever. In first edition, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a fun part when they get to this person who also has a gun. They're like, oh no, this is my nemesis. So a lot of the story stuff can be tweaked pretty easily. Just like having an NPC like have a bit of a past with a PC character, just instantly
building those connections.
Yeah.
Owen asks, have you ever considered writing a blog post about how a GM should customize an AP to their players?
I guess the question is like, generally or specifically. If you want to, we could. I mean, that is a fine idea, and perhaps even. More than just a blog post.
Yeah, that's the real challenge, because our blog posts are like 400 words, right? Like they're tiny. But if we wanted to get into specifics, you'd need a lot more room. Especially if I come from an academic background, so when I try to walk through something like this, I always want to provide examples.
Yeah,
or actually get a bunch of players together or get some sample characters. Get an adventure and show how you would customize the adventure to fit those characters, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of room.
That could even be something fun that we could do live-ish on a stream too. Just
absolutely.
Hey, tell us 4 characters and we've got this adventure that we know about.
Yeah.
How we can customize this in one way or another, just real brief ways to show examples.
Yeah. I remember when I was doing
a PaizoCon seminar. Yeah, thank you. Not bad.
What do you think would be the best party composition to deal with the swarm?
Okay. To deal so if you're talking about just fighting the swarm, even just 4 soldiers would be pretty good, or 4 vanguards.
Well, so you need somebody with area attacks.
Sure, yeah, you don't need it, but it's helpful. It's always helpful.
You don't need but that would help.
It certainly wouldn't hurt. Whatever. It's basically, and in the first volume, there's a little bit of a player's guide that talks about hey, don't take acid weapons because the swarm are immune to acid, and the military knows this by now.
And but they do rely on telepathy. Are there anti-telepathy effects you could bring into play?
There might be some, and it might have been some stuff that is in some of the earlier volumes or in this swarm article that talks about here's a spell that can mess up, or a weapon fusion. If you've got the swarm Hivemind ability, that you smash them up real good. So stuff like that.
But everybody uses weapons.
Yeah, exactly. So anyone can use that. In a way, you probably want someone who can do some healing if it's medicine or mystic version.
In many ways, I would say make characters that tie into the story more than the class. Like, for example, if we've got this new Hivemind connection in this book. So, make a mystic with that Hivemind connection, and that will allow you to really feel like you're a part of the story. The fact that you are a mystic is less relevant than the fact that you have a class feature that's tying into the story of this campaign.
Yeah.
Once a swarm leaves a planet, is it possible to recolonize that planet and try to revive it, or is it a doomed cause?
That is sort of in a way, the question of the 3rd volume.
Oh, really?
World, right?
Oh, Huskworld,
because there's that planet has been 100%, almost 100% sucked dry.
Liz wrote that one.
Yeah, Liz Adele wrote that one, and there are resistance fighters on there who are like, we want to take the planet back, and it is. I think it's possible. I mean, in our science fantasy game, kind of anything is possible.
Anything you planet, can Genesis affect it.
If you could, something like that. We talk a lot about terraforming. We don't necessarily have game mechanics for them yet because we like to use it more of as a story thing.
Yes. Because the players aren't going to be terraforming
exactly
in game time.
So planets can be re-terraformed. I think it's probably real difficult. It is. The swarm essentially solved the Earth You know what I mean? When they come, they
Yes,
take everything.
They take everything.
For the
They're
most
locusts.
part, they are locusts. They eat everything. They take everything. They even sort of get geothermal energy out of
Oh, really?
the core.
Yeah.
Possibly causing the core to grow cold. It depends on how long they stuck around. I guess.
Right.
Is it possible to revive? But I think with great big science fantasy hand waving, you could revive a planet
with planet level magic.
Yes, it would take a lot of effort, a lot of resources. Probably a company, a large company like Abadar Corps or something like that would have to be the one to do it.
It sounds like a great campaign.
Yeah, we have starting from scratch.
Campaign hook. Yeah.
So
we're gonna wrap up, but we want to note that we have a guest here, BB Wolf. Which podcast is that? What stream?
That's Punch and Crawl.
Oh, fantastic! Okay,
Punch and Crawl's been doing their game as usual after Starfinder Wednesday. So stick around.
Stick around and watch Punch and Crawl.
Yeah,
watch them play.
Some good old Starfinder.
And thanks for coming and giving us questions. And we'll be back next month, or it may just be a few weeks in the schedule. But we'll be back soon.
We'll be back for talking more about Attack on the Swarm. Yes,
that's right.
Eventually we will. Next week is some more. I think a little more calm
goodness.
Preview. Yeah, exactly. So stick around for that.
Starfinder Wednesday every week. We'll be back in a few weeks with the next adventure path.
Goodbye.